Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jonah. I am from Spotlight, and today we are going to be talking to Lucy. Lucy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jonah, and I'm excited to be here.
So excited to have you here. And I know we got a lot to cover today, but before we dive in, just
Mhm.
want to make sure everyone is in the right place, knows what we're talking about, knows how these things work. So please hop in the comments. And first off, let us know if you can see and hear us well, if everything's rolling, how your day is going, where you're tuning in from, maybe how you heard about Lucy or how you heard about Spotlight. We love hearing all of that. And also feel free to ask any questions throughout the presentation. We'll try and get to them as they pop up, but if we don't answer them right away, we are not ignoring you. We've set aside time at the end for a proper Q&A where we can get through all of those questions. So pop them in when they come to mind. If we don't get to them right away, pop them in again during the Q&A. And if things are moving fast, you have to get up away from the computer, the dogs go crazy, anything like that, do not fret. All of this will be available in a replay. It'll be on the YouTube, it'll be on the Spotlight event page, and it'll also be emailed to you along with the course offer, which we will talk about a little later. And just to make sure everyone is in the right place, like I said, we are talking to Lucy Tucker, and we are talking about understanding DISC, the universal language of observable human behavior. The DISC behavioral assessment is a tool used to help understand a person's behavior. When we have a better understanding of who we are, we're able to improve our communication and increase our productivity. Now, Lucy, I know you got a lot to share with us, and I just want to start diving in so we can get into the meat of it. So I'm going to
Well,
hand it over to you.
thanks, Jonah. And I'll say, if this is usually a very interactive class, and I love to, so feel free to jump in at any time if
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
if you have a question or a comment that you want to share. I will say that I have been a little background about me with DISC is I have always been fascinated with human behavior, and I'm sure people have heard of Myers-Briggs or DISC or the Berkman method, and there's just always there's several forms of assessing personality types. However, there's really just four major personality types. So that's what we're going to be covering today is those four major personality types. And I love to start off this class with this quote from Lao Tzu, an ancient philosopher, because it's so true. Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. Mastering others is strength. Mastering yourself is true power. And I think what that really says to me is knowing yourself, your personality traits, your style, what you like, what makes you tick is the best place to start so that you can understand others as well and deepen your relationships and become a much more effective communicator. So, today, what we're going to do is we're going to do an overview of those four personality types. We're going to give you some clues on how to identify each type, and we're going to give you tips on how to interact with each type, whether that's on a personal level, a professional level. Hopefully, you'll find a lot of value in everything we cover today. So, getting started, there are some truths about human behavior. And the first truth is that you meet and interact with people on a daily basis. And every interaction you have is either going to increase or decrease your credibility with that person. And that starts off with breakfast, kids coming downstairs, the conversations you're having. It continues when you go to your favorite coffee place and you're talking with the barista. And then it follows you into work or school. Every conversation you have with that person is going to increase your decrease your credibility, how they're going to listen to you, if they're going to tune you out, if they're excited to hear what you have to say. And the other truth is that the way others respond to you is a direct reflection of how you are treating them. Now, I like to pause here usually in the class and say most of us have learned to grow up with the golden rule: do unto others as you would have done unto you. So, Joan, I'm going to ask you, have you heard of the platinum rule?
No.
Ah, I love it. I love when people say that. So, the platinum rule is my favorite, and that's the way I tend to hopefully raise my children this way and all those around me, is how you should interact with people in the real world. So versus the golden rule, like we said, do unto others as you'd have done unto you. The platinum rule changes it up and says, do unto others as they would have done unto them. And what I love about that
Hmm.
is I have a certain personality trait. And if my personality trait might conflict with someone else's, and if I'm treating them the way I want to be treated, it could be the exact opposite of how they want to be treated. So with DISC, if you can quickly identify your personality, quickly identify the person that you are with and hoping to have a relationship with and deepen it, if you start treating them the way they want to be treated, not how you want to be treated, they're going to feel heard, they're going to feel valued, they're going to listen, and they're going to know that you're listening. So you always love to start off with that. And I'm
I
curious
love
if,
that. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, it
it's
also it requires you first and foremost to learn about the person you're talking to, and that's
mhm.
always gonna create a better relationship, right? Yeah, that makes so much sense. Love
Absolutely.
it.
And it's all about, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So, we should really listen twice as much as we speak. And I think when it comes to assessing personalities, it's a good rule of thumb because you're gonna be looking for how somebody speaks, their tonality, their body language, their pace, all of those things. We'll cover those a little bit today. So, in the professional world, if employees that are working for you, if they don't like you, they're not going to work hard for you. So you want to use this on a professional level by deepening those relationships, being the leader that people want to follow, or somebody that really wants to work hard for you and help you accomplish what you want to accomplish and accomplish it together. And another rule in the professional world is people buy from people they like. So you want to be that friendly approach or that approach that they're looking for the tools or the systems or whatever you happen to be selling, whatever it is that they need. And then lastly, you do not sell a product, you influence people. And you'll hear, I'm sure you've heard that phrase, I could sell ice to an Eskimo or anything along those lines where it's like, okay, why would you do that? It's all about the influence that you're having. And this is influence in a positive way, not mind manipulation way. It's a positive way. And you want to, again, everybody on the same page. And then we'll also talk about some areas where you can find out maybe if you're not on the same page, how you can adjust your behavior or the words that you're using. So as we talk about these 4 personality traits, again, there are 4 unique behavioral styles in the world, and they come out as the following. Some people are forceful, direct, results oriented. Some are optimistic, fun, and talkative. Some are steady, patient, and relaxed, while others are precise, accurate, and detail oriented. Now, you may have a little bit of every one of these, but in DISC profiling and DISC assessments, you'll find if you take a DISC profile that you usually have 2 what we call above the line and 2 below the line. And one of them is the one that you lead with, and then the other one is sort of another strong trait for you. And again, there's many different personality assessments throughout the world. The one that we offer in the other class that we teach, where you get to do your own personal assessment and get a 70-page report back, is it really just breaks down to these 4 major categories. And you don't want to pigeonhole yourself or someone else into. Once you become more familiar with DISC, you have to be careful where you're not saying at them, "Oh, stop being such a D," or "I can see your eye coming out," because the whole world hasn't done DISC. So I do say though, if the whole world knew their DISC profile and did yoga, we'd probably have a very peaceful, calm, relaxed, loving environment. So how do you know who is who? Well, that's a great question. And hopefully we're going to give you some tips today and some easy to identify characteristic traits. When we're talking about understanding those personality types, I will use some alliteration as much as possible in these to give you that quick 1-word answer. So with a D, they're going to be the dominating type. They're the drivers. They're demanding. They're direct. They're very action oriented people. And again, that's not going to be their only trait, but that's going to be the trait that comes out and is most visible to others. The I's are very influencing is the best I word to use with an I. They're very expressive, they're talkative, they like to be the life of the party. So you'll know an I. It's very high. I's don't, they're not shy and they don't hide. So you'll know that who the I's are in the room. S, there's lots of wonderful words that help you define or quickly identify an S. Steadiness, supportive, stable, sincere. They're the amiable, friendly ones. They want to help everybody out. And then the C is compliant. Some of those C words are compliant, careful, controlling, exacting, precise. I know those aren't C words, but those are the words that you should think of when you think of someone who's correct or compliant or careful. And the way the world tends to break out these personality types is there's about 9% of the world's population that are Ds, 29% that are Is, and 31% of S's and C's in some studies. In other studies, you'll find as many as 70% are S's, which is great for us because S's are the team players and they're just everywhere in the world, the people that you want to have around you. So it's great that that is the majority of the population, but that's kind of how it breaks out. And I know in a lot of sales fields and industries, very heavily influenced by D's and I's, and they think that they're the majority of the population, and they're really not. And the people that they're dealing with or selling to or trying to help with their products are usually S's and C's. So it's important to remember that. So we're going to go into some of those quick understanding the high D at a high level overview. When you are working with that high D or looking for something, they are results, efficiency. Again, remember, direct, demanding. They are known for being self-reliant and competitive and high risk takers, and they desire change in their environment, and they sometimes, to the dismay of those around them, they'll come in like, oh God, Tasmanian devil, whirlwind, come in and really try and take control of the environment that they're in. And they have a great sense of urgency. So if you're with somebody who's super fast paced, they talk in bullet points, or they're very direct, more than likely you're surrounding yourself right now with a D. When Ds like to learn, not surprisingly, they like high level overviews. They like challenging exercises and competitions. And they like assignments where they can get something done. Again, that feeling of accomplishment is really important to them. And that high level overview, I always like to throw in an analogy here for the movie The Matrix, if you've seen it, when at one point in time, one of the characters wants to learn to fly an Apache helicopter. She doesn't know how to do it. She goes over to the machine, they plug it into the back of her head, and about 15 seconds later, she's got all the knowledge she needs to go fly an Apache helicopter. That would be an ideal situation for a high D to learn. So you're not going to find them in a lecture hall. They get very impatient. They will sit through and do those things, but just know if you see that person, their knee is going, they're looking around the room, they're checking their phone, they're ready to move on to the next thing. And with each one of these personality traits, I'm going to give you a quick litmus test, shall we say, on emotion. Each one has an emotion tied to it. It doesn't mean that for Ds, for instance, anger is the emotion that's tied to the D profile. Now, that doesn't mean these are angry, horrible people. They are just in that fight or flight response. They're the ones that are quick to fight. If their back is up against a wall and their emotional state is high, they're going to be the one who's jumping into an argument and really defending themselves. So if you're thinking about looking at all of these things, if you're starting to contemplate who might be a D in your life, yeah, I would say to you, Jonah, if you thinking about this, do any of these characteristic traits pop something into your head where you're like, oh, that makes sense. That person sounds like a D to me.
Yes, I always struggle with these kind of personality tests because I try and find something in every kind of person where I'm like, oh, I'm like that sometimes or this sometimes. So it's very hard for me to boil down like what is the consistent like aspect of me. And when I've done these kind of things with friends, they're usually good at being like, oh yeah, that's what makes you this kind of person. That's
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Yeah.
by the end of this class, hopefully you'll be able to say, "Oh, I have a clearer view of who I am now, and I probably lead with this one and that one, but I'm definitely not that." And sometimes that's the best way to figure out who you aren't is by seeing things that you're like, "Well, that's definitely not how my friends would describe me." And I do love to, at the end of each one of these slides for the understanding section, I'm going to give you an analogy to being on an elevator. So if you were
Mm,
to get on an elevator with a D, more than likely they're rushing into the elevator. They're probably looking at their phone. They're looking over at the keypad and they're pushing the number and they keep pushing the number or they're starting to huff and puff if more people are getting on the elevator. So
uh,
that's that's a
yeah.
quick way
Well,
to identify a D.
and Oscar had a great question here, and you may be getting to this. So if you are, we can table it for a little later. But
Mhm,
what happens if you have a clear top one, and Oscar was saying D, but the next two are almost a tie? Basically, got
mhm,
65
mhm.
on the second and 64 on the third. Is that normal? Possible? I imagine blends are possible or common in this range, or how do we deal with those?
Absolutely, and that's an excellent question. And I would say probably a great question to throw out to people in the chat is how many people know their disc profile and or have
Mm,
ever taken an assessment. So to answer his question, yeah, you usually again there's no right or wrong answer in behavioral styles. You are what you are. We're usually after the time we hit about 25 years of age when the frontal lobe is formally formed, that is when you start to have those behaviors that are going to stay with you for the rest of your life. Unless you have a traumatic experience, a really defining life experience that might change it a little bit. But really, once you become that person, that's who you're going to be. So, to his point, if you're really high on one, like my profile, I am a 99I, 99D. So
mm,
they don't add up to 100. So
right, right.
I'm off the charts with both of those. And then my S and my C is very, very low. And it doesn't mean that I can't have some C characteristics and traits. It doesn't mean that I can't adapt to that. It just means my energy level will be down if I have to work in that realm of behavior. So
Right. Okay.
yes, you can absolutely you're there it usually 99% of the time you'll lead with one of those four traits and where the others fall, they could be even above the line, they could all be below the line, which means you're very strong in that one trait. Or you could have some I've seen people that are almost right along that baseline where they're kind of even keel with all four of them. That's very uncommon. You usually do lead with one or two, but there are those people that are kind of very even keel. And I had done this once when I like to do this when I'm on boards that I'm working with so we can work more impactfully together, collaboratively together. And I was on the school board in my town and I could tell because I've been doing this for a while. I quickly identify who everybody was before they even took the assessment. And there was one person I had a really hard time. So once she took it, she was one of those people that was across all four. And I was like,
Interesting.
that makes sense. That makes
And
sense.
so that that's interesting. What you just kind of alluded to a second ago is this isn't necessarily a concrete exactly how you act in every situation. It's how it's identifying where you thrive, the environments that you thrive in.
Exactly. And
Okay, I
once
love
you
that.
know your profile, yeah, that's it. That's right. And then when you know your profile, and you don't have to make any excuses for it,
Right.
it makes a lot of sense. It's like, oh, okay, so that's going to be you have two behavioral, and when you do an assessment you'll see these. You have your natural style and your adaptive style.
Mm,
And your natural style is the way you are when nobody's looking. It's just who you are. It's also who you are when you're in a stressed situation. So your adaptive style, you might tone down some of those things. When my adaptive style, my D goes way down. My I stays high, but my D goes way down. And that's when I'm working with people in an environment I'm a little more aware of that D. So I say I don't have any of that mean D. Like that goes
right.
away. Um, and and again, if I get stressed, it probably comes right back out. So that's what you're going to see there. So the important thing to think of, just to your point, Jonah, is just know that if you're a really high I and you're going to be working with a really high C, there's usually some friction there because they're very different personality types. It doesn't mean you can't work perfectly together. You just need to be aware of it and don't expect the C to behave the way you're going to behave.
Right.
And don't expect and make sure that the C doesn't expect you to behave the way they're going to. Because for you to get into a C behavioral style, it's going to be it's going to drain all your energy. You can
Right.
do it. It just drains your energy. So,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
great point there.
Love it.
So understanding that high I, and as I mentioned, I am a high I, so you can see how much we're talking here. The I is looking for that experience. They are known for they're people oriented, they're fun, they're verbal, they're very persuasive. They ask a lot of questions. They're big blue thinkers. They're creative. They're high risk. They have high risk takers, and they come up with lots of ideas. One of the biggest drawbacks for an I is they don't necessarily carry them out. They ask a lot of questions too. So if you're around someone who needs to be the life of the party, or who always tends to be, or the one who's trying to gather up friends, I think a statement I heard once, which is very true, is a stranger is just a friend I haven't met yet to an I. So that's what you're going to find with those I's. With that high I, they prefer to learn by, quite logically, role playing. They want to be in an exercise with you and bounce ideas off. They love discussion. They love collaborative group projects. So if you've got a lot of people working together that are high I's, just make sure, and we'll get to this in a second, you'll find out why you need some C's, because you can come up with lots of great ideas, but in order to get them executed, you're going to need some C's. That I is going to have some challenges with that. And the emotion factor that's tied to that I is usually optimism. And optimism can be a wonderful thing. It can be that silver lining someone's always looking for, that glass half full. However, it can also be, oh, everything's going to be great, and don't pay any attention to the reality, and they have blind spots. So again, one reason why it's great to not only know all four personalities, but know where your I wouldn't necessarily call them weaknesses, but where you may be lacking, and then make sure you have some people around you that can help you with that. So again, find your blind spots is a better way of doing that. So again, with an I, you're going to need lots of time if you're associating with an I, because they do need time to socialize, and they can tend to not stop talking. So the elevator analogy with an I, if you get on an elevator and someone comes in, steps on, and turns and has their back to the doors, but faces everybody there and starts saying, hey, how's your day going? Where's everybody off to? What floor are you going to? More than likely, that is going to be an I. So with that S, which again, remember the S's are the majority of the world, thankfully for all of us. They are known for, they're people-oriented and they're warm. They're stable. They also crave stability. They do not like change. They're the peacemakers and peacekeepers. And they're very systematic and methodical, and they do not take risks. So we have a very high S in our family. We call him Switzerland because he never wants to rock the boat. He wants to support everybody. And this is a wonderful team player. I mean, we definitely need S's with us. Teachers tend to be S's, just nurses, just those people that really keep the world going. And we wouldn't be anywhere without them. It is important to know with S's, again, that they don't like change. So if you're working with an S and you have to move into a change. I mean, we could talk about how COVID has impacted each one of those profiles, but with S's in particular, it's hard. It's totally changed everyone's world for sure. But adjusting to new ways and not having answers, it's just been a stressful time for all of us. But the majority of them would be the S's. And again, that is the majority of the world. They prefer to learn by demonstration. Watching somebody do it and say, oh, okay, that's how it's done. Well, now I have confidence and now I can go do it. Or practicing individually or in small groups, not large crowds, not lecture halls. And they do love shadowing someone. So again, they'll see how it's been done before, and then they have more confidence to go and do it. When it comes to the elevator analogy with them, they will be the one who is holding the door open for everybody who's getting on the elevator, even to the point of the detriment of themselves, where now the elevator is full. And they're like, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it, I'll wait for the next one. So again, quick analogy there for that. So Jonah, I'll have you jump in again, see if there's any S's that that you're thinking of, or any characteristic traits, or any questions you have.
I think off the bat, S is the one I personally identified the
Mhm.
most with. Um, and for me, that was mostly just like the demonstration learning. I'm watching YouTube all the time. I thrive in those environments. If someone shows me how to do something, I feel like I can do it
Mhm.
usually.
Mhm.
So I get confidence from seeing other people accomplish a task and being like, oh, I can do that.
Yeah, well, I 100% would have said that about you just by doing a little research before I jumped in here. That I would say, because you bring people together, you're a collaborator, you do, and you have you're providing us with such an amazing tool. So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course.
And yeah, and again, you like to have that collaboration with people. So yes, very, very high S, I would say. It's probably one of your leading trait there. Um, and I don't want you to be offended by this when I get to what the emotion factor is when it says unemotional. That does not mean S's are devoid of or void of emotion.
I
What
feel nothing, Lucy.
what that means is, when you have that S, like I say, when the S in our family, when he's upset, they're usually quiet to begin with and don't need to be the center of attention. You can go by and like, where did Liam go? He's so quiet. He's so quiet. So usually if you're working with someone and you feel like they've been coming along side by side with you, but all of a sudden they've retracted and they haven't asked any questions or anything like that. If they're an S, there's probably something wrong. So it's a great time to ask questions like, are you okay? How is everything? Checking in. If you'd been in a relationship with somebody work wise and all of a sudden the email stopped coming, you might want to send them a text, or better yet, pick up the phone and call and say, hey, just checking in, just want to know how you're doing. That is usually, again, it's that don't want to bother anybody with their problems. So they internalize things and keep it to themselves to their detriment. So
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
yes, yeah, it is interesting. So that high C, what they are looking for, they crave information. They are task oriented. They seek details and analysis. They have a critical eye and a critical nature, and they're very methodical and careful. And when I say critical eye and critical nature, they can come across very rigid, especially if you're not a C. And they're not trying to be critical. It's just they're usually your perfectionists. They want it to be right. They don't want to make mistakes, especially if it's work that they're doing. They also would prefer that any work that you bring to them is not haphazard. They just want it more organized. But again, you need those C's. Those C's are the ones that are going to catch those blind spots for you, or say, well, have you thought of this? Or looking at the whole big picture, looking at the risks. They don't like to take risks. So, but they're great at analyzing them. They're really great at analyzing them. And they'll move forward when they have all the answers. So they like to learn by highly organized, fact-based lecture, note-taking constantly, um, looking for more sources of information where they can follow up, whether it's reading and studying role models. One of the challenges with a C is you will often find that C's can suffer from paralysis analysis, where they want to make sure they have every single answer. T's are crossed, I's are dotted before they move forward, which is why, perfect example of a great relationship in the environment. I have a business partner where she's got a very high C, and her C balances out my very high I, because I'll come up with these ideas, but then she helps us get into execution. And I will keep her from getting too paralyzed on, we have to have all the answers. It doesn't have to be perfect. So we just should get it out there. So we balance each other well. It's like a yin and yang. And you find this oftentimes in relationships when you hear people that talk about opposites attract. A lot of times we like to hang out with people who are just like us. And then sometimes if it's in a work environment, we need to not be doing that. We need to have people that are just like us. And then we also have people that are not like us that help balance us out and make sure that we're not missing any holes. And again, compliance is a really important role to have with people, especially if you're in the legal field or things that need to get checked and balances, and if there's deadlines or lots of things like that that need to not be missed. That C is going to catch that. With that emotion factor for C, it's fear. And again, like the S, this is not meaning that they're a timid, scaredy cat. It's just fear of being wrong. It is wanting to be perfect. And sometimes I failure to make that decision without having all those answers. So just keep that in mind. If you have someone who's hesitant to move forward to the next step, it's probably a C. They want more information. They crave it. So make sure you've got it and come with fact-based argument if that's what you're looking for. When it comes to that elevator, that C is going to get on there, count the number of people, go over, look at the sticker, see if you've exceeded the weight, and then also while they're there, check and see when the last time it was inspected. So those are just a fun way to think of how do you remember all of these, quickly identify all of these personality traits. So now we're going to just jump into an overview of the personality styles and then how to work well with each one of them. And we're going to start with that D. And again, remember that D likes action. They're the one who's going to be impatient, ready to go, get things started. Their greatest asset is out accomplished. And accomplished, and what I mean by that is they're very competitive. So if you are working with a D or you're in a relationship with a D and you want them to get their homework done, or there's something that you want them to do that they're not doing, turn it around and make it a competition, or say, I don't think you can do that, because they're going to be like, watch me, and they're going to get it done. Really. Their greatest fault is they can't stand weakness, mostly in themselves. So they'll see that in others. And sometimes it's a judgmental thing, even though they don't mean for it to be. But that's, if they come across as judgmental, that's really what it is. They're seeing somebody who maybe they don't think is standing up for themselves, or getting ready to get into action. Again, these are the risk takers. They like a challenge and they don't like risk. And then that greatest fear, again, is being soft or being taken advantage of. I was just taking this to a personal note here. We'll get to the I's in a minute, but my husband is a high D, and my I is higher than his D. And he said, you're so nice. People will take advantage of you, where the greatest fear of an I is not being liked. And I was looking at him saying, well, I don't think you're nice enough. So, but what it was funny was, we're seeing in each other the things that we fear, which to that person, it really isn't a fear. So being soft or being taken advantage of is not something that an I cares about. And I just thought it was an interesting thing. It's one of those things that dawned on me. I was like, oh, that makes sense now. I understand why we see the world differently. So when you are working with that high D, if you want to have success, again, make sure you are clear, specific, brief, and to the point. You want to work and talk in bullet points. You want to stick to business. You want to come prepared with objectives and materials, and it's got to be organized. They do not want you to waste their time. So they're busy. They've got lots of things they got to do, and they're on to the next thing. This is a perfect spot to talk about where I had a client I was sending them emails. They were an out-of-state client. And I was giving them very lengthy emails, and all I was getting back was fine, great, sure. And then I realized, I've taken all this time to do it. And then again, back to that platinum rule, I was providing information the way I'd want to receive it. And I started to think, wait, I think he's a high D. So the email started being bullet points to the point. And that is when he opened up and he came back with, this is great, so valuable, thank you. Do you think maybe we should do this? So I was talking on his level where he could hear it. And again, you can do that in email, you can do that in text, and obviously you can do that voice to voice. So with that I, jumping onto that overview, again, they love tossing around ideas. They love collaboration. They will probably do that all day long. And again, probably not get anything done. They are usually fun to be around. They make great friends and like to be very social. That's one of their greatest assets. One of their greatest faults is they're very erratic. They are definitely squirrel and off on another tangent. So if you're working with an I, just know that, set some boundaries, and don't let them be distracted by that shiny object. And as I referenced earlier, when I was using that example for the D of their greatest fear, eyes not being liked is one of their greatest fears. They really just want, they're incredibly emotional people. And you can see that they wear their heart on their sleeves. And they also, again, for that reason, want to be liked. Where a D, it's not as much of a concern. Ds are more fact-based and task-oriented. Ds and Cs are task, and Is and S's are emotion. That's really what they're driven by. So again, with a D, they're not intending to be mean or abrupt or short with you. That's the way they come across because they've got a lot to do. And I could take that very personally. Oops, sorry, went to wrong one. So skipping forward. Wait. I don't know how I got so far ahead.
Lucy, we got a good kind of question while you're getting to the right slide here. Rolanda was asking, I find myself most comfortable in S, but when I'm stressed, I seem to move to D or C. What is that about?
So Yolanda, again, that she's most comfortable in S.
And then it seems to, when she's stressed, moves to D or C.
Okay. So that means, again, your natural behavioral style is probably DC. And that means, you want to get things done. You're anxious, but you want them to be right. DC is a very common combination there. The S is going to be your adaptive style. That's when you're like, okay, I want things to be peaceful. I'm happy to be around people. I want to support them. I want to help them. But when it comes down to critical decision-making time or a stressful situation, that could be when your back is up against the wall and you get into D mode and you're like, okay, we have to get this done. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
And for some reason, again, I think I went down on a slide here. But when you're working with that I, you want to leave time for relating and socializing, planning interaction that supports their dreams and intentions, and make sure you pad that. Because again, they want that experience. They love storytelling. You can relate to things in a story, unlike the D that wants those facts. And asking for their opinions and ideas regarding people is really important to them as well. But again, I can't stress this enough. Use enough time to be fun-loving and fast-paced. They're fast-paced and fun-loving and moving, but just make sure you pad it. So if you know you're going to be spending some time with an I, give yourself a buffer of, I don't know, give yourself a buffer and then buffer your buffer because they could take up even more time. If you set a deadline with them, or you're going to make a phone call to an I and you've only got a few minutes, you start off the phone call by saying, hey, I really want to talk to you and I'll call you back when we've got more time to chat, but I've only got 2 minutes and I just wanted you to know X. So keep that in mind. And again, goals. They're very goal-oriented people, and they do find opinions very stimulating. They also want you to think that their opinions are very stimulating. So on to those S's. They want a productive routine that really excites them. They like stability. They like systems and models. Again, not such a big change-up person. Change is hard for them. Doesn't mean they can't do it. Just means they prefer to stay in a don't rock the boat such environment. Their greatest asset is they're so easy to get along with. They're just, again, thankfully, it's the largest majority of what we have in the world for behavioral styles. And it's what makes the world go round. And you want tons of S's on your team. That fault, again, is that timidity. And it's not, again, scaredy cat or fear there. It's just they might not speak up for themselves. They may have they will have great valid points. So if you're working with an S and you haven't heard from them, I usually recommend this to boards or environments that you're working with. Make sure everyone around the table has been heard, because the S's are the ones who are not going to raise their hand. They'll be there and support you 100%, but they're not going to raise their hand. And again, that greatest fear of theirs is change. So keep that in mind if you're moving into an environment where you have to change, whether it's a new system or a new product or the way you've done business. Just know it's going to take a little while. That S, when you're working with an S, you want to start with, however brief, a personal comment, just sort of to break that ice, because again, that sort of timidity piece there. The thing that's really important to do with that is just make sure you are sincere. Do not say something to an S if it's not truly sincere and you don't believe it, because they have a great BS meter when it comes to that, and they know when someone's being sincere. So they do want you to show interest in them. They show interest in others, but it's got to be sincere. And then if you want to work with an S and have them listen to you, make sure you don't barrel in, especially if you're a D or an I. You don't want to barrel into the situation, because they're going to back off and, again, possibly retreat. You just want to come in calmly, casually, start off by breaking the ice and say, I'm so excited to be working with you. Let's talk about how that's going to work. And then again, here the one of those questions that's important to them are how questions to draw them into the conversation. How does that make you feel? Again, back to the feelings. How is that going to work? Do you understand what we're talking about there? And then again, you're going to watch for that careful possible areas of early disagreement or dissatisfaction. And I'm going to throw that quiz out there to you, Jonah. How would you know if an S is not clear with or dissatisfied or feeling anxiety about a situation? What's a clue?
They don't want to talk.
Oh my God, A+. You get a gold star.
I don't want to talk about it, Lucy.
Exactly. Perfect. So just be aware of that when you're working with those S's. Now for that last section, the C, the analyzer. What excites them is reason, logic. They're incredibly logical. Facts, again, resources, and sourced information. Their greatest asset, high quality work. You are definitely going to get the perfectionism is going to come out in their work. So if you need something done and done correctly, or if you've got a really big presentation or something you're going to be delivering to somebody that's really important for it to be perfect, make sure you have a C review it for you, because they will catch everything. Again, that greatest fault, someone may see them as too critical, but it's that perfectionism coming out. So they're not too critical. They just want it to be right. They want it to be perfect, and it's a good thing. And then their greatest fear, that irrationality, not being right. There's a place for everything and everything in its place. And I's can drive C's crazy because they're so irrational and erratic. And C's, as long as they know that, going into that relationship, as long as you know it and you can address it openly, like, I am sorry, I know this, I'm not coming to you with enough facts here. That's just, again, this is a great cheat sheet for how to quickly identify and how to work with. And working with that C, you want to prepare your case, in quotes, in advance. And again, fact-based. Do not come into a situation with a C if you want them to do something for you where you're unorganized or you don't even have anything to back up your request. You're not going to get very far. And you want to take time and be persistent with them, because again, remember, they're the paralysis analysis. So give them plenty of time, but then also follow up and make sure they know that there's a deadline, and support their principles. Definitely be complimentary of their systems, because they do have such a thoughtful approach, and their credibility, and it's so important to them that it's like, I'm coming to you because I know I'm going to get the best work, the cleanest report, no mistakes, and I can count on you for that. So those are types of conversations that you'd have with a C. But if you want to gain credibility with them, make sure when you go in, if you're approaching a new subject, don't only list the pros, but list the cons. And they'll know that you've done your homework, and you'll gain credibility right away with a C like that. So if you come in all bubbly with just here are the great reasons, and you don't come in with, well, and here's some things that we may have some challenges with, they're going to immediately bring up the challenges or know that you haven't done your homework. So again, back to that, give them time to be thorough. Many, many years ago, I was working in a bank, and to show my age, we had one area where you could go to get photocopies done. This was long before photocopies were in every department, or you didn't even need them anymore because we were paperless. And you would go down into the basement of this old building, and behind these closed doors with just a little window where all the C's were hanging out, you would hand over your copies that you needed done with a little ticket on it and say how many you needed and when you needed them by. And above the window, they had this huge sign that said, "Poor planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on our part." And it is such a C comment, because basically what it means is if you want something done, make sure you don't come in and dump it on their desk and say, "I needed it yesterday," or "I need it tomorrow." They will do the best for you and have such an accurate report. You do need to give them time. So plan. If you're, especially if you're a high I or high D, you're going to want to plan there. Okay, my dogs might come in and make a couple of comments about that as well. So also with them, you want to provide them that solid, tangible, practical evidence as to why you're doing things and why you're moving forward. Now's a good time, Jonah, maybe for you to jump in. And what about when you work closely with someone? Do you have any questions before we dive into this section?
No, a lot of people that have been chiming in, kind of trying to rationalize this blend of
Hmm.
different ones and when they make sense, when they're applicable. Um, and so I don't have any questions so far. I've been definitely like identifying just what applies to me. There's some people like the C type where I'm like, oh my God, that person in my life. I know. I
Yeah,
know right away. The person who's like, I'll take a risk. I just want to know absolutely everything that could happen before we do it.
100%. Yeah. They're the ones that you want checking your parachute before you go skydiving.
Or doing my taxes, right? It's like that kind of.
That's you. That's you. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. All right. So now we're going to move into this will hopefully maybe answer some of those questions in the chat. So adapting to a high D, being efficient and competent. And if you are not a D and you're working with a D, you want to support their goals and their objectives. You want to keep that relationship very businesslike, to the point. Do not waste their time. Use facts, not personal feelings if you disagree. Again, they're not emotional. So you coming to them and with a sob story, they're not going to care about that. Use the facts. Go to, this is why we have to do this, or this will happen. You want to be well organized because they are busy. They're going to move on to the next thing. And then you're going to recommend alternate actions with brief supporting analysis. So if this doesn't work, we're going to do this. With a D, I find it's always good. One of my favorite quotes and sayings is, it's not how well you design plan A, but how well you execute plan B that's important. So when you're going to work with a D, make sure you have a plan B. So nothing will stop their progress. And you're going to get to that point quickly. And again, competitive results, growth opportunities. If you want a D on your team, and it's going to be a competitive environment, they're going to thrive in that. They're going to really love it. So competition and get things done. When you're working with that I, if you're not an I, you want to make sure that you support their opinions. You, again, ask them about their family, what their goals are. They're very goal oriented. You want to be fast paced with them and upbeat. If you come in sort of a downer mode, an I is going to be like, okay, I don't want to spend time with this person. So be as upbeat as possible. And again, if you're one of the personality types where you like a C that maybe just wants to get done and doesn't want to deal with the chit chat, just know that you have to be a little bit more, not necessarily warm and fuzzy, but just know that the I is going to want something like that, something personal. You can tolerate their digressions and not hurry their discussion. But again, that's the padding of time. Make sure you pad a lot there, and try not to argue with. This is one of my personal favorites. Don't think my husband would agree with it, but I love this one. Try not to argue with an I, because you will seldom win, because they are very influential. They'll come up with other ideas. They're very creative. If you have two I's arguing together, the conversation will never end because somebody always wants to be right and somebody wants to win. And an I and a D, it's an interesting, when you have difference of opinion, it's an interesting conversation, but it's also fun. So you want to be enthusiastic with them. They love spontaneity. This is the one that if you just said, "Hey, you want to go on a road trip this weekend?" Your eye's going to say, "Sure, let's do it." And you can also be more casual with them. They're not so formal. They're not so rigid. And when you are talking to them, if you really want to fluff up their feathers, make sure that you enhance their image and visibility, and talk about how ways that you can support them. "Oh, I saw you doing that and it was wonderful." They really, again, it's not so much a superficial thing as it is a personal pride thing. And again, remember, they want to be liked. So especially if you go to things like, "Oh, I've heard you're such a great friend or a listener," or, well, even though they're not necessarily the best listeners, because they do talk a lot. But you do, again, if you don't want to lose them, spare them the details. If you go into a long, drawn out lecture series, they're going to tune right out. Um, when you are working with that S, here again, you want to be warm and supportive, and you want to feelings, feelings, feelings. Show personal interest when possible with them. You want to start off with, "Oh, I saw maybe on Facebook that your son had a game last night, and congratulations on the win," or if it's a loss, "How's he doing with that?" So they're really going to they're really going to jive with that, and they're going to love that you noticed or appreciated that. You're going to assume that they'll take things very personally, because they will. Again, that emotion is factor definitely is they also wear their heart. They don't wear their heart on the sleeves as much as an eye, because again, they keep a lot of it personal and inside. But there is pride there. There's great pride in their family and their relationships. And you want to allow them time to develop trust in you. They're almost like, I guess a good analogy is a cat. It takes a lot to get the trust, and then when you have it, you'll have it forever. So just know that it's got to be sincere again. So again, we talk about those personal feelings, not facts. When you disagree, if you talk about how I understand how you might be feeling about that versus this project didn't get done on time, it's just, you could destroy them by not acknowledging how they're feeling. And you want to move slower with them in another informal setting, but a steady manner, not erratic. So if you're an I, make sure that you're not so erratic with that. And then you are actively listening. So again, great way to show that you're actively listening is always asking a question. "How does that make you feel?" And then when they tell you, make sure you repeat that and say, "Oh, so what I'm hearing you say is," and then they'll know that you're actively listening. You want to give them assurances that risk will be minimized or handled as reasonably as possible. So, in the example in the real estate world, we deal with a lot of people. It's one of the most emotional experiences you can do in your life, and there's a lot of change, and there's a lot of S's in the world looking for homes and buying and selling, and it's very stressful. So, if you're a realtor, you want to be that guide for them. Be there with them every step of the way. Let them know that you can do the negotiating and the hard parts, and you're going to keep that stress to a minimum for them. All those things are really important. Whatever journey you're going on with an S, just to make sure they know that you're by their side. And when you're working and adapting to that C, especially if you're not one, remember, they're very organized. So come in with an organized, thoughtful approach. Make sure you show your commitment through your actions. So don't say to a C, "I will have that done," and then don't do it. If you say to a C, "I'll have that done by Friday," and then you get it done, then they're going to know, okay, they can rely on you. They can depend on you. They want that dependability, especially when it comes to work or something that impacts them. You want to be detailed and accurate. And again, they're very logical. And we talked about this before, but make sure that you list advantages and disadvantages of a plan. You're going to do that with the D. You're also going to do that with the C, because if they have all the facts in front of them, that will help them move forward faster. You want to provide that solid, tangible evidence, and you want to adhere to those established procedures. Give them reassurances and assurances that decisions won't backfire on them. When it comes to things like procedures, I like to say, it's a great analogy here. When it comes to rules, your C's are usually the ones who make the rules. They create them. The S's are going to follow those rules. The I's might not even know that they're rules, or if they are, they think they probably don't pertain to them. And then the D's are the ones who more than likely are breaking the rules. So just another quick, fun way to kind of summarize in a real life situation um, how you might be able to identify somebody. So now we're at the stage where you know enough. And that knowledge should be able to take you far. And we're going to dive in and test your knowledge in a minute, Jonah. But just wanted to, at a high level, kind of review again with that energy level, your body language, and your tonality, which with all four of these. So with that D, they're going to be the temperature you would consider with a D is cold, and the pace is going to be fast. So again, it's not so warm and fuzzy, but fast pace. With an I, it's going to be hot and fast. So they're hot and fast, where very erratic, all over the place, and very fast paced. And that S is going to be slower to move, and they're going to be warm, not scalding hot, and definitely not cold. They're going to be warm and slower paced. And then a C is going to be also slower paced, but a cooler environment. Again, not cold like that D, but cooler, wanting all those facts. And again, that moving forward on a slower pace there. And if you want to think quickly, if somebody asks you a lot of what questions, what's going to happen? What are we doing with this? It's probably a D. If someone's asking you a lot of who questions, who's going to be there? Who's going to be doing it with us? Who's that going to impact? It's probably an I. And if somebody's asking you, why are we doing this? Going to be an S, why the change, that sort of thing. And then the how are we going to do this, or how are we going to get it done, is the C. So that's sort of a very high level overview of just a couple of things with tonality and with body language. Those D's are going to be quick, fast paced, arms crossed, moving on. The I's will be hugging you. The S's will give you a little bit of space, but be very supportive. And those C's want their space. So especially if you're an I that comes in and wants to hug everybody, be cautious and conscientious of the fact that you've got some C's that want that personal space around them. Jonah, do you have any questions before I give you a quiz?
Mike had a great question, but I think we should save it for the Q&A so that we can dive in. So I think, yeah, let's dive into the quiz.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to give you a second. I'm going to quiz you and see if we've done a good enough job of giving you a high level overview on how to identify. So identifying that personality type for the behaviors below. If someone is quick to make decisions and they want showy products and they're an impulse buyer, what do you think their personality is?
Oh, that's hard because I'm thinking it depends on what purpose the product has for them. I would say a C.
Well, I can see why you would say that, but if you think of it in the terms of they're impulsive, that impulse buyer,
Oh, a D.
they're going to be an I.
An
They're gonna be
I.
They
Oh,
could be a
interesting.
D. They could be a D because they're quick decision makers also.
That's
But
where I was kind of trapped. Yeah, at
yep,
first.
yep. And
Yeah.
D and C have a lot of common traits there. That showy products is definitely your I. Definitely your I. So if you've got someone who loves change, again, who I'm sure you know who it's not, but who would you think loves change?
Would that be an S?
The S is the one who does not love change.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, see, that's the one where I just identified with the S the most, but then I love change. So it's so hard to separate myself from the
So that's where
Yeah,
taking the actual DISC assessment would give you so much more information, because my
right.
guess is you're an SI,
Ah,
and I's love change. So S's want to, you can have these kind of conflicting personalities within yourself, but there is one that you predominantly rule with. And if that S, if you love, or you don't mind change, or you love change, you are more than likely usually a D. But if all the other parts of your personality traits we've been talking about leads me to believe they're kind of probably an SI.
okay,
I
okay.
would say that. So the next one, when it comes to conflict response, I know we talked about. I'll give you a clue as to what it's not. When you talk about avoidance, we talked about that fight or flight with the D. So you know a D is not going to avoid things. So what do you? Who do you think would be somebody who would avoid conflict?
Well, this is where I would think the S. Oh, a
Mhm.
C? See, I'm thinking the emotional avoidance.
You are 100% correct on that. So S is also a very acceptable answer for this one, because S's don't like that conflict response when it comes to, um, they don't like it when it comes to rocking the boat, but a C doesn't like it when they're wrong or been told they've been wrong. So
Mm,
C or S is acceptable there. All right. So driving. So if you're driving down the street and you see somebody who's looking around, who's listening to the radio, who's not paying much attention, who do you think that is?
that would be a D. An I. I clearly don't know enough about eyes.
Well, we're just gonna have to do this. We're gonna have to do this more extensively with you, get you into the next class.
Yeah.
The difference between the D and the I is the D, yes, they can also be distracted, but they're more direct. So you might not see them looking around as much as they're going to be the one
Mm,
that's, a good traffic analogy I say with all four of these personality assessments is, see, all of them are late. The scenario is you're late to work. Well, the D is the one who is going along and cursing all these people pulling in front of them because they're making them late and they're merging in. The S is the one who's letting everybody merge in.
right.
The I is the one who's merging in because they're driving down. They're like, oh, nobody's going to mind. I'm just going to smile and wave and they won't love me and they'll
Right.
let me in. And the
I
C
love
won't even be there because the C saw on the news that there was an accident. So they got to work early. So good ways
Okay.
to put that driving in there. Okay, so office decor. This is a good one if you're going into a work environment and you're seeing somebody's office for the first time. You can tell a lot about a person by how their office is decorated. So if they have family snapshots and it's a very homey atmosphere, some security, what do you think that is?
So I would be a little trapped between an I or a C here.
So an
Yeah.
S is going to surround themselves with photos of the family. They're going to surround themselves with things that just that are important to them, maybe souvenirs from, the sand from one of their trips, their family trips. It's going to be a very comfortable atmosphere. It's going to be nice and clean.
Mm,
Where you were talking about the I and the C, if you were describing office decor, an I probably has it's cluttered. It's not
right.
necessarily
Right.
clean. It's going to have all kinds of things that make sense to the eye, and it could be family snapshots because of the emotion aspect there. It also could be words and phrases. Like you can see behind me, I've got the word believe off on the side there. It's going to have, it might not seem any rhyme or reason to you. So that's usually that I. The D is going to have probably their awards up,
Mm,
acknowledgments, their certificates for the college degree or something like that. But definitely awards will be up. And then that C, it's going to be probably that clean slate desk. Like you're going to walk in, there's not going to be anything. Everything has a place and in its place, or there's nothing there. You'll never see my desk like that. I can
right.
tell you that.
What I think my instinct with the C was just wanting comfort.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
that makes so much sense because they find comfort in everything being organized, clean.
You got it.
Got it.
Exactly
Got
right.
it. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
If a C had to go work at an I's desk, they would have so much anxiety. And same thing with an I going to a C's desk. I am a spreader. I spread everything out. So there's stuff all over the place. And my God, C's just have a heart attack. If you could see the desktop of my computer when I teach this class and
Oh,
it
sure.
first, it freaks out all the C's.
I
They
got
just
it.
want to come organize it.
Yeah.
So when we talk about goal setting, if they have many goals, if they're high risk, and if they're usually not written down, who do you think that is?
That I would think is a D.
Very good.
Okay.
Yes.
Getting better.
All right. And when it comes to email and letter writing, if they're long and if they're giving you lots of information and they might be asking about the family, not so long that it's not the same as when you're speaking. Email and letter writing. Who do you think this would be?
Say an S.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yep. Now this one we kind of already talked about a little bit
Right.
with the desker. Who do you think that organization is? Everything in its place, perfectly organized.
That would be a C.
You got it. And then reading, this is always an interesting one. So reading, if it's someone you see that they've got fiction or self-improvement books on their shelf, who do you think that might be?
Oh, An S? Or is that an
That's a
I?
It is an I.
Ah,
It is an
okay.
I, and S's tend to read things more like, Reader's Digest stories, things like that. Fiction, I's like to get lost in a fantasy world.
Mm,
S's might want more, homey type information. Um, so they tend to read things like that. But again, this is
gotcha.
not hard and fast. This is
Right.
just sort of, if you happen to see that, maybe they are. Look for other clues. Rules, we kind of already talked a little bit about this. So who knows and follows the rules by the book?
There'll be a C. Yep.
Mhm. And they also wrote them. So,
Right.
when they're standing, we talked a little bit about body language. If they're leaning forward and their hand is in the pocket and they seem like they're impatient and ready to go, who do you think that is?
That'd be a D, right? Yep.
Right, right. Now, this is a little bit of a tricky one, but if for stress relief, if they really like their alone time, um, cleanliness, one thing's away, etc., who do you think that might be?
A C? Yep.
Very good. Oh, and here we are. We're back to magazines. So
Oh,
if
okay.
someone's Reader's Digest or National Geographic, we talked a little bit about that already. So
That'd
remember
be
the
an
names.
S.
Right.
Yep.
And then phone conversations. If you have little chit chat, to the point and direct, who do you think you're talking to?
A D?
Very good.
Hey. Okay. Okay.
Excellent job. Excellent job. All right. I'm going to give you one more, and we're going to do this now with
Uh-oh.
personality.
Okay.
You're geared up. You're ready to go, right?
Yep.
Okay. So, who do you think Oprah Winfrey is? What's her personality profile?
Ooh.
Think about she's not afraid to put herself out there.
No,
She
I would
likes
s
being in the limelight.
D or I is kind of
Mhm.
my okay. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. So this will
'Cause I
this will
could
give
see
you.
her being a D off screen and being a
Uh-huh.
little more
Yep.
yeah.
Well, that leads very well into the next one. What do you think Barbara Walters is?
That I would be like a D.
Totally.
Yeah.
So you do not, if you have something to hide, you do not want to be interviewed by Barbara Walters.
Yes.
I'll tell you that. She'll
Yeah.
get it out of you. How about the much loved Mr. Rogers?
He, I would think, is, an S or an I? An
He is
S.
an S. He is
Yeah.
like, if you take the definition of S and put a picture next to it, it is Mr. Rogers. And I know they just recently did a movie on him,
Oh,
and I
it's
was
so
reading
good.
some other interesting facts about him that was really cool that I never realized before. You'll notice with him, he's an SC because he comes in, they start the show off with the traffic light. And if you note this, I'd never noticed. Watch this for years as a kid. Never noticed it. They start with the yellow light. So it's not green, it's not red, it's yellow, so that
Huh.
you slow your pace down and you follow him inside, and he takes his jacket off and he puts on his yellow sweater and he puts on his shoes, and he's just very soothing and methodical, and just a lot of thought was put into that show. It's fascinating. Really
Oh,
fascinating.
yeah. Every aspect that show is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, so Mr. Spock, who do you think Mr. Spock is?
C,
You
right?
got it.
Yeah.
Yep, he is definitely a C. And another, if there's any friends, fans out in the audience, Monica is like the epitome of C because she's like neurotic about her apartment. She's everything has to be clean, everything has to be in its place. She's another one that, but Spock is perfect because he's very um, unemotional in his responses. It's very fact based, and yeah, you were 100% correct with that one. All right, now this one's a little bit trickier. So Michael
Yeah.
Jordan or John McEnroe, what do you think they are?
I'm tempted to say I.
It's a good guess,
Oh, okay.
but they are really D's. And when you think about it, they're very driven. As we know, John McEnroe, for those of you who've ever watched him, he's quick to anger. So
It's true. Yeah.
he shows that emotion on the tennis court from time to time. And Michael Jordan, again, stacks statistics, very competitive.
That's true. Yeah.
Once you win, that drive is there.
Yeah.
So Gandhi, Mother Teresa, what do you think of when you think of them?
Uh, altruistic caring.
Mhm,
So I'm
mhm.
tempted to think, S?
And 100%.
Yeah.
Yep. They were very giving of themselves, sometimes at their own expense, their own. They just were just incredible, and supportive, and putting others ahead of them. Just yes, they are also another perfect example of an S. Now, here's another tricky one. Jack Nicklaus, he's a professional golfer. For those who don't know which Jack Nicklaus I'm talking about there, not to be confused with Jack Nicholson. What do you think his personality trait is?
I don't know him, so just
Mhm.
purely off of professional golfer, I would think a C.
Very good.
Yeah.
And it's because they are precise in their measurements, which have with the caddy obviously off helps, but
Right.
which club am I going to use? How far do I need to hit the next one? They're very calculated. It's a good C word for them. And then that last one, our last quiz.
Robin Williams.
What do you think? What do you think Robin Williams
I would
is?
think I.
He is an I. He's a
Yeah.
very, very, very high I. And he's if you've ever seen him in comedy mode, he's erratic and fun and jumping from here to there and making people laugh. And yeah, so very good. You did an excellent job on those quizzes.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
that concludes everything that we're going to cover today. And now we can get into the Q&A. And I think if I can get out of here.
Yeah. So for everyone watching, please hop in the comments. I know we still had a couple questions from before, but we have a little more time with Lucy. So hop in the comments. Let us know what your questions are. And while those questions are rolling in, Lucy, I wanted to talk a little bit about the course we're
Mhm.
offering today. So the course is all about understanding DISC, right? And diving into being able to use DISC in these situations, both personal and business, right? Uh, can you get a little outline, like if someone is coming in knowing nothing about DISC,
Mhm.
where are they going to be after the course?
So that's a great question. And we do actually have another DISC class coming up that's a little deeper dive into the assessment. You'll
Mm,
actually, if you go to Knowles Development and see it out there, it's Understanding DISC 2.0. With that class, you actually have the opportunity to take the assessment, and then we're going to review your personal assessment. So you'll know what yours are. There are other places you can go if you just type DISC assessment online. There's plenty that you can do for free, but it doesn't really give you the deep dive into areas that you should really very eye-opening. It's very insightful and very eye-opening. So I highly recommend that. What if they have other questions? I mean, I could talk DISC and personality assessment all day long.
right.
So anybody feel free to reach out to me if they have any specific questions or how to use it in their work environment. Again, you can use it personally as well as professionally. And really the goal, my goal is really just to have people have a high level overview of starting with yourself. So it's good to have that assessment. And then once you know that, then you can quickly identify those traits in other people.
Mm, mhm.
And that's what's going to help you deepen those relationships. That's really what I think DISC can be used for advantage for sure.
Right. Right. And just so everyone knows, if you're watching the replay or here live today, the links for the course are pinned at the top in the comments and they're in the description. And there's a healthy little discount on there today. So it's only $40 for the next 7 days to dive into this. And I can already see all the ways in which this is so useful, especially if you get a hang of it, like you're saying, where you can walk into a room and in 10 minutes at least have a guide so you can like approach people where they're at and not just be pushing onto them. So I love it. We do
Sure.
have to we do have to wrap up in a little bit here.
Mhm.
So I want to start diving into some of the questions here. Was
Mhm.
there anything else you wanted to say about the course before we start answering questions?
No, happy to answer questions.
Yeah. So this question came up really early on, and I think it's a great one to clarify when we were talking about the golden versus the platinum rule.
Mhm.
Zahir asks, are those two rules mutually exclusive?
Excellent question. So, again, doing unto others as you would have done unto you, the very premise of that means please treat people well, nicely. How do you want to be treated? You want to be respected, you want to be heard, you want to be validated. So you can still continue to do that. The platinum rule goes into not at your expense there. So if you're treating someone the way they want to be treated, Obviously, you're going to keep your own safety in the forefront and what's good for you mentally and physically. But if you're in tune with their personality and sort of cater to way they want to be heard or how they want to be listened to or what their work environment is, then that's how really I think you apply that platinum rule. You will, when somebody knows that you're listening to them and they feel heard, that's what deepens those relationships. And
Yeah.
if you're using the way you like to be talked to with somebody who doesn't necessarily listen that way, then they're just going to tune out. So I don't feel they're mutually exclusive. I just feel they're kind of a different approach.
Yeah, I relate to that very much. I know people in my life who have become feel like they live by the golden rule and therefore have
Mhm.
also become very expectant of other people acting the same as them
Mhm.
in
Yep.
certain situations. So that's why when you first said the platinum rule, I'm like, ah, that makes so much more sense. I love
Yep.
it. Um,
Definitely.
Mike Lovell had a great question here, which is there a tool or framework that we can use to do a subjective assessment of the likely disc categories of each person when they join a new team? So, kind of the inverse of your grid,
Mhm.
so that
Mhm.
walking into a room and being able to do a subjective assessment, how do you kind of apply that?
So if you're doing it formally, an assessment with them, or you're just trying to do it in your mind as you're assessing people around, you know what he means by that? What do you mean by that?
Might pop in, but let's just assume, like in the situation where you're managing a team
Yep.
and a new person comes on and you maybe don't get the opportunity to actually have them do a disc evaluation.
Right. Right. So I would say the framework of some of these from these slides here, and again, I'm happy to share what we would call a cheat sheet with anyone who's interested in having that. There is a great cheat sheet that I have that you just keep it up in front of you or outside. And I've known people that who actually do know their disc profile that have put their disc outside if you're in an environment where there's cubbies
Huh,
outside your
okay.
office door. So you know, oh, okay, this person's an SC and I'm walking into that room. So well, I should tone down my eye a little bit. So I think there's many ways that you can do it, but I think just I had the opportunity to do this the other day with a real estate team where
Huh,
I they'd all done the assessment, the one that I recommend, and then we reviewed it as a team together. And it gave them permission to start to talk and say, "Oh, okay, that makes sense why you do that." And and then it bonded them more as a team. I mean, it was really great. So I've done that again with nonprofit people. I've done it with boards and just any group or volunteer organization that you're working with. It's a great way to start off so you can start that relationship on the right foot. And then, oh, we might be missing a seat. Like when I was on school board, the highest C in the group, she was the one who was on the rules and regulations committee. She was the one that dealt with the attorneys that went through all the policy and procedure. Like that would drain me. She excelled at it, just
huh.
excelled at it. And then she also had that opportunity to say, "Oh, well, my C's going to come out now." So, and she would start the conversation that way. So I'd know that she was going to get into the really nitty gritty details. So I did not tune out.
I love that. It's so really, if nothing else, because I've always been someone who struggles with these kind of categorizations because I'm like, well, I'm a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a
Mhm.
little bit, but really we're just creating a universal language to talk about our personality, like
Exactly.
trends with each other, right?
You got it.
I appreciate that very much. Well, Lucy, you've mentioned people can reach out. How do people reach out to you if they have further questions, want to know anything a little deeper before diving in?
Well, probably the best way to reach out to me, because then I would also have their email in case anyone's interested in the next class or taking the assessment, is my email, which is Lucy Tucker, LucyTucker at kw.com.
Love
So
it.
that's probably the easiest way to get me.
Cool. I love it. And then also for everyone watching, I am dropping into the chat. Knowles Development has a whole bunch of courses.
Too.
So we have the discourse here today in the links, but in the chat, you can also go check out all their other courses. Lucy, we have to wrap up just for
Mhm.
time's sake here, but I appreciate it so much. Thank you for walking us through and and also having such a flexible approach. I think it's easy when people are talking about personalities to get into this. You can only be this one or
Right.
this
Right.
other type. But I love seeing this framework where it's more flexible. It's just understanding which situations and trends make sense so we can it's for the purpose of relating to people more and
Exactly.
working with them, right?
You got it.
Uh, so I appreciate that. And for everyone watching, thank you so much for being here. Please hop in the comments. Thank Lucy for her time, her expertise. And if you had a good time, please subscribe to the Spotlight channel. We are continuing to bring folks like Lucy out here to help us all grow our understanding of business, language learning, art, personalities, so many of these things. And it's a total blast. Lucy, thank you so much for your time. Hope to see you soon. And
Gina, thank you so much for offering this platform. I think it's fabulous. It's really wonderful. It's a great gift that you're giving to people, and thank you for that. And I'm going to talk to you offline sometime and get your assessment done. I'd be happy to
I was
validate.
gonna
Yeah,
I was gonna say that was gonna be my last thing. I need to go get a disc assessment.
I'm going to send it to you.
I love it. Well, I'm excited to see the results, and thank you once again. We'll see you soon. Have a wonderful day, Lucy.
Bye, everyone.